Aloha folks, it's Kiora with the Business Spotlight. However you get from point A to point B, we all know accidents can happen, so we wanted to speak to an expert, attorney Jana Poe, about some important things you should know, whether you're driving, biking, or walking.
A scary thing when people are involved in a motor vehicle accident. What should they know when it comes to medical bills?
That's a very good question, because a lot of people are confused about where they're going to bill for their medical bills, okay? Especially the ambulance and emergency. In fact, I've had people not get in the ambulance or refuse to go to the emergency room because they don't have the coverage. They think they don't have medical coverage anywhere. Well, that's not the case. In Hawaii, it's called a modified no-fault state, which means if the car is insured, there's something called personal injury protection coverage, and that provides at least up to $10,000 for anyone who's a passenger or driver of the car. So they need to know that, because it's not correct to bill it to their private insurance, and it's terrible if they don't go and get the treatment they really need to have.
So as far as accidents go, what about pedestrians?
Well, pedestrians are handled a little bit differently. Because they're not in a vehicle, there is no personal injury protection from the vehicle they're in, obviously. But when you're hit by a car and you're a pedestrian, it's one of the few situations you get your personal injury protection coverage from the car that hit you. So a couple things are real important. One, call the police, because the police need to make a police report, because that's where you'll find the information about which insurance company is on the car, covering the car. If a police report's not made, you're going to have huge trouble trying to figure out who the insurance company is.
Okay, so as a follow-up question, what if there is no insurance?
Yeah, that can raise some very, very big problems. But the first place you should look at is your own insurance policy. There is something called uninsured motorist coverage. If that is in your policy and you're provided that coverage, that will apply when there's no insurance on the car that hit you. Now, there's a little difference between PIP coverage for medical bills. That will be there for you in every policy that you have. If you own your own car, you will have PIP coverage in there for your medical bills in the event you're hit by someone without insurance when you're a pedestrian. There is also something called underinsured motorist coverage for a recovery for compensation for your injuries if the car that hit you has no insurance. That is an optional coverage. It's not in every policy. So when you take your insurance policy out, I would encourage everyone ask about the underinsured and uninsured motorist coverage. It's really important when you get hit by someone without insurance.
Okay, so we've covered motor vehicles, we've covered pedestrians. What about, say, bicycles, mopeds, motorcycles, that kind of thing?
Yeah, those are covered a little differently on each particular category, so try to follow me here. All right, bicycles are covered pretty much the same way a pedestrian is covered. Okay, you would get the PIP coverage, the medical expenses covered by the car that hit you. A real moped will also be covered the same way a bicycle and pedestrian is covered. They also get the PIP medical coverage from the car that hit them. Now there's a little difference here when it deals with motorcycles. It's not really a little difference, it's a big difference. Okay, motorcycles will not be entitled to the PIP coverage from the car that hit them. It's just the way Hawaii law has been drafted. So when you're going to ride a motorcycle, make sure you have your own insurance coverage somewhere else, because you're not going to get your medical bills covered in case a car hits you. There's another thing that's pretty important to know. There are vehicles called motor scooters. They're considered larger than mopeds, but smaller than motorcycles. In fact, the cutoff is if the engine is over 50 cc's. If you're on a motor scooter, it's treated just like a motorcycle, and it's not treated like a moped. So if you go out there and rent a moped, which you think is a moped, you really need to make sure with the people you're renting it from that it's truly a moped and not a motor scooter, because it makes a huge difference on what kind of insurance is going to apply.
And of course, there are other scenarios too, like what if you're on a bus or in a shuttle? You can find the answer to that in my article at MauiNow.com. I'm Kiora for the Business Spotlight, Business in Focus, Maui in Mind.